Most watch brands pick one audience and serve it well. Seiko picked everyone, across every budget and every lifestyle, and has been doing it since 1892. This lineup we bring runs from just over $300 to close to $7,000. The movements are different, the finishing is different, and the audience is completely different. But every single watch on this list is legitimate, not a stepping stone, not a consolation prize. 24 watches, every tier, every price. By the end of this, you will know exactly where you belong. Number 24. Seiko 5 Sports SKX Series, mid-size 38mm models. For years, the entire Seiko 5 Sports lineup ran at 42 to 44mm cases. Then, the SKX series addressed an issue quietly, with a 3/8mm case that doesn't sacrifice anything meaningful. Same 4R36 automatic movement, same build quality, same price. It just fits the way a watch is actually supposed to fit. Flush to the wrist, proportionate, not hanging over the edge like something borrowed from someone larger. Most watch guides skip this one. That is a mistake, particularly for anyone with a smaller build or a preference for proportions that look intentional. Starting somewhere around $300, this is where the Seiko story begins for more people than you'd expect, and it begins well. This next watch ended up on military surplus lists for reasons worth knowing. Number 23. Seiko 5 Sports Field HDB 008 K1. The Field variant exists without apology. Fixed bezel, muted dial, and a canvas strap that looks like it came out of a government warehouse. None of that is a criticism. It is the entire point. The HDB 008 K1 was designed for the kind of day you do not want to think about your watch. It goes on in the morning, keeps time through whatever happens, and comes off at night with evidence of the day on it. The 4R36 movement runs without a battery. The case handles knocks. At around $385, you can wear it like you do not care about it, which is exactly what a field watch is for. Here is the quiet truth about Seiko's entry level. The Seiko 5 is the brand's reputation. If it feels cheap, everything above it suffers. Seiko made sure it didn't. Built for work, this next watch showed up on more wrists in 2026 than any other Seiko 5 alive. Number 22. Seiko 5 Sports SRPE 5 Dress KX. Walk into any watch forum in 2026 and ask for an everyday automatic under $350. The SRPE 5 will come up first before anything else loads. Seiko built it by removing the rotating bezel from a sports case and finishing the ring in steel instead. The result is a watch that sits somewhere between athletic enough for a weekend and polished enough for a Monday. Most watches that try to go both ways end up looking confused. The SRPE 5 does not look confused. Sunburst dial, 40mm case, stainless bracelet, and a movement that hacks and hand wins. Two features that used to be optional at this price and aren't anymore. Available in enough colorways that picking one requires an actual decision. Street prices sit between $275 and $325. Check out the next watch that does something extra and somehow keeps the price in check. Number 21. Seiko 5 Sports GMT SSK 001. A GMT complication, a second-hour hand tracking a different time zone, usually enters the conversation somewhere above $1,000. The SSK 001 puts it at $495. The 4R34 movement running underneath is not the most precision-tuned GMT in existence, but it works correctly, and it gives anyone who travels occasionally, or runs teams across time zones, or just thinks about it, a genuine complication at a price that doesn't need defending. With a blue and red bezel and a bold dial, it is a tool watch with energy from a different era. At this price, you don't need a reason to buy it. You just buy it. The next one is a cultural moment for an entire generation of watch buyers. Number 20. Seiko SRPD 5, the SKX successor. When Seiko discontinued the SKX 007 in 2019, the watch community had a sustained, quiet breakdown. The watch had been the gateway automatic for a generation, affordable, built for real use, distinctive enough that ownership felt earned. The SRPD 5 was the answer. Case shape drawn from its predecessor, bracelet tightened, and movement upgraded to the 4R36 that hacks and hand wins. Two things the original SKX famously didn't do. Black dial, unidirectional bezel, 100-meter water resistance. It checks every box the SKX checked and fixes a few of its frustrations. Between $350 and $420. This is the automatic diver that more people buy first than anything else on this entire list. Not through marketing, but just through doing exactly what it claims to do, every day, without asking for attention. Now, let's talk about a watch that took 2026 personal. Number 19. Seiko 5, sports SRPL 9.1 and SRPL 9.3. In 2025, Seiko released something nobody expected them to care about this much. The SRPL 9.1 and SRPL 9.3 reference the Seiko 5 sports models known as the Jean Crans from the late 1960s, not with a casual nod, but with genuine historical commitment. They have a bi-directional bezel, case proportions drawn straight from an archive, and a dial layout that belongs in a different decade. At around $250 to $350, this is nostalgia done correctly. Sometimes, a watch earns its place not by being the most advanced thing on the market, but by reminding you why any of this started. This next watch pulls from the ocean, and means it. Number 18. Seiko Prospex Save the Ocean series. Seiko's Save the Ocean editions sit at an interesting intersection. Limited production, marine conservation partnerships, and dial designs that sell on meaning as much as mechanics. The proceeds support ocean protection organizations. The watches do not need that story to justify their existence, but it adds texture that makes ownership feel different from a standard purchase. The dial work on the best editions is genuinely compelling. Deep blues, layered marine textures, colorways that photograph better than they look in person, which is saying something. The movement underneath, 4R or 6R depending on the edition, is the same proven caliber across the Prospex line. The construction is proper, and the 200-meter water resistance is real. Prices range from $400 to $1,500. These sell out fast, so it is worth watching for new releases. Those are built on meaning. This next one was built for depths most people will never experience. Number 17. Seiko Prospex Tuna. There are 600 meters of water between you and this watch's limits. The Tuna was developed in the 1970s for professional saturation divers, people who live in pressurized underwater habitats for weeks at a time and cannot afford a watch that fails. The outer shroud surrounding the case is not a style choice. It is structural protection for the crystal and crown in conditions that would destroy any conventional case. The fact that people wear it on land with jackets is one of watchmaking's better jokes. It also says something true. Design that solves a real problem tends to look correct long after the problem stops being relevant. Newer Tuna variants run between $300 and $6,500. The case is larger and heavier than everything below this on the list, and that weight is a statement about what the watch was built to survive, not a flaw. This watch took the same Prospex DNA and made it wearable for the other 6 days of the week. Number 16. Seiko Prospex King Turtle SRPE 03. The King Turtle answers a specific question. What happens when the cushion case turtle design is not quite enough? More case volume, deeper water resistance at 200 meters, and a slightly more assertive presence on the wrist that reads as serious without becoming theatrical. The bracelet construction holds its shape through extended daily wear, which sounds like a minor detail until you have owned one that didn't. Between $500 and $700. The King Turtle is the diver you grow into after the standard turtle convinces you that this design has something worth staying with. The King Turtle is the evolution. This next one is the original, and it still holds its ground. Number 15. Seiko Prospex Turtle Spy 9.3. In the 1970s, Seiko produced a cushion-shaped dive case that looked unlike anything else. In 2026, they are still making it. The SRPE 9.3 in black on rubber sits between $300 and $525, depending on where you find it. The 4R36 movement is reliable, and the 200-meter water resistance at this price remains quietly extraordinary. The case shape is distinctive enough that turtle owners recognize each other in the wild, which is either charming or slightly unsettling depending on your feelings about watch communities. Seiko didn't keep refreshing the turtle shape into relevance. The original form was right the first time. That is rarer than it sounds, in watchmaking or anywhere else. The results of the next watch made design publications stop writing about Switzerland for a paragraph. Number 14. Seiko Presage Styles 60S SRPG03, $550. For a watch that pulled mainstream style publications back toward Japan and made them stay a while. The Style 60S series is Seiko doing mid-century, cool, warm dials, round cases, leather straps, and a general posture that belongs on someone with opinions about vintage furniture and where coffee comes from. The SRPG03 ivory dial is the standout. Unhurried, warm, dressed up enough for a jacket, but relaxed enough for a good shirt and a normal day. The vintage inspiration here is not nostalgic window dressing. The proportions and layout were right the first time. And for anyone who finds modern sport watches slightly exhausting, this is the answer. The next entry is about an upgrade of a completely different type of aesthetic. Number 13. Seiko Presage Cocktail Time SRPB43. The Cocktail Time proves that a dress watch does not need a premium case material or a prestigious movement name to feel like it deserves to exist. It just needs a dial that people cannot stop looking at. At $450, the SRPB43's blue and silver sunburst dial catches light in a way that dials on watches twice its price attempt. The 4R35 movement is not the most refined caliber in Seiko's lineup, but it is correct for a watch at this price, and it runs with the kind of reliability that makes the Cocktail Time something people actually wear rather than preserve. This next watch is what happens when the craftspeople in the watch world stopped holding anything back. Number 12. Seiko Presage SPB495 NML Dial. Somewhere in a Seiko facility in Japan, a craftsperson is applying enamel to a dial by hand using a process that takes multiple days and can fail at any stage without warning. If it fails, it starts over. There is no shortcut and no machine that replaces this step. The SPB495 is the point where Seiko stops being a value proposition and becomes something else entirely. Enamel dials are fragile, time-consuming to produce, and deeply traditional. They are not common at this price, and they are barely common at 3 times this price. The result is a dial that looks different from every other watch you own, imperfect in the way handmade things always are, alive under changing light, in a way that printed dials simply are not. You can get it for around $1,400. What that money buys is not just a watch. It is the decision someone at Seiko made that this process was worth doing at all. Handmade and deliberate. Same line, completely different energy. All edges and angles now. Number 11. Seiko Presage Sharp-Edged GMT SPB221, SPB223. The Sharp-Edged collection reads like a design brief that had one word in it. The cases are angular in a way most watchmakers avoid. Flat planes meeting at deliberate angles rather than the rounded case architecture that has dominated watch design for decades. The dials are based on the Asanoha pattern, a traditional Japanese geometric pattern derived from hemp leaves cut into faceted surfaces that interact with light differently depending on where you are standing. The GMT variant adds a 4th hand and a 2/4 hour scale. For that complication to work in this design, it has to fit without disrupting the visual discipline that makes the sharp-edged worth anything. It does that well. Between $1,000 and $1,400 for the GMT configuration. The 6R64 movement is worth the price tier on its own. This is a watch that rewards attention, which is either a compliment or an admission that it takes some learning. This next one is Seiko, thinking at a completely different altitude, and the price starts to say so plainly. Number 10. Seiko Presage SPB471. Start at the price, $1,050 to $1,150. Look at the watch, then look at the price again. The SPB471 pushed the Presage line into territory it hadn't previously claimed. A grayish-black, deeply finished dial, a multi-row bracelet that behaves like something from a higher segment. The 6R5J movement underneath offers a power reserve of over 70 hours, which sounds like a spec until you are 3 days into a trip and still haven't wound the watch. The finishing across the case is not just competent. The transitions between polished and brushed surfaces, between angular and flowing, are exactly where the money went. This is the watch that makes you question whether spending more is actually necessary, not as false modesty, but as a genuine statement about where craft ends and premium branding begins. This next watch carries a name with a history and earns every syllable of it. Number 9. King Seiko Vanek SLA 083. King Seiko. The name sounds like a provocation directed at the broader watch industry, which is either accidental or entirely intentional. The history strongly suggests the latter. In the 1960s, Grand Seiko and King Seiko were separate competing lines fighting for supremacy in Japanese watchmaking. Grand Seiko eventually absorbed the category. King Seiko went quiet. In 2022, Seiko revived it, not as a heritage vanity project, but as a real bridge between the main lineup and the refined finishing of Grand Seiko. The SLA 083 and its variants feature flat polished surfaces, sharp beveled edges, and case architecture that holds up in a design museum as well as it holds up on the wrist. The finishing would be notable on watches at twice the price. Between $2,900 and $3,300 for its models, King Seiko is actually saying something that the Swiss watch industry has never fully admitted. That excellence in watchmaking was never a European invention. It was just better marketed. This next watch was built for a completely different kind of terrain. Number 8. Seiko Prospex Alpinist SPB 121 Green Dial. The Alpinist ends up on the wrists of engineers, architects, hikers, and people who do not consider themselves watch people but own 4 of them. It is not a dive watch, not a dress watch, and not pretending to be either. The SPB 121J1's deep green dial and cathedral hands are among the most visually distinctive designs in the entire Seiko lineup. Not flashy, but distinct the way purpose-built things tend to be. The inner rotating compass bezel is purely mechanical, genuinely useful if you use a compass, and a very satisfying way to feel prepared if you don't. The 6R35 movement provides over 70 hours of power reserve. Between $500 and $725, it is slim enough to slide under a jacket sleeve, built to resist magnetic interference, light enough for a mountain, and interesting enough for dinner afterward. Rare in watches and rare in life. It actually works in both contexts without apologizing for either. This next watch was built to mark a specific year in history and became something permanent instead. Number 7. Seiko Prospex 1968 Heritage Diver GMT 60th Anniversary Edition. In 1968, Seiko's professional divers were already on the wrists of Japanese Antarctic expedition members. The watch doing that work looks like nothing in current production. For 2025, the 60th anniversary of Seiko's first dive watch, the brand produced a GMT diver that draws directly from that 1968 original. The proportions are deliberate, the lineage visible rather than suggested. The dial carries a deep blue wave pattern that references the ocean honestly rather than decoratively. The GMT complication sits cleanly within the design without competing with it, which is harder to achieve than it sounds on a watch this historically anchored. Around $1,300 to $1,900, depending on where you find it, the 6R54 movement is accurate and correctly spec'd. This is an anniversary piece that exists because the original genuinely deserved recognition, not because a product calendar had a gap. There is a difference between tribute and evolution. This is evolution. Heritage with real function. This next one measures time in a way most brands cannot technically achieve. Number 6. Seiko Prospex Speed Timer SPB 513, SPB 515. The SPB 513 and SPB 515 are traditional 3-hand, time and date automatic watches with a rotating inner countdown bezel built directly into the dial. No pushers or stopwatch, just a clean face, a 6R55 caliber underneath, and a timing function that works the way a serious tool watch timing function should, through a physical bezel you set with your fingers before the moment begins. On Swiss watches carrying these same specifications, the price begins above $3,000 and climbs from there. These run between $800 and $1,500. The cases are confident without being theatrical. The legibility is exactly what a tool watch demands. Immediate, unambiguous, no deciphering required. This next one is historical, the diver where Seiko's entire professional legacy actually started. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 5. Seiko Prospex 62 Mass Interpretation, SPB143. In 1965, Seiko built Japan's first dive watch. It is called the 62 MAS. It goes on the wrists of commercial divers at a time when the sport dive watch category barely exists, built by engineers solving a practical problem rather than designers serving a market. Most people have never heard of it. The SPB143 is one of its interpretations, and it does not announce itself. The gray dial is muted and serious. The case has the compressed, purpose-built quality of something designed from a technical drawing rather than a mood board. No unnecessary surfaces. Everything exactly where it needs to be. Between $750 and $1,200, depending on when and where you find it. The 6R35 movement is correctly matched to the build, but what the SPB143 really is, beyond any specification, is a piece of watchmaking history you can wear without putting it behind glass. Everything above this on the list traces back to decisions made when the original 62 MAS was being built. That history is in the dial if you know where to look for it. That is the origin point. This watch is what that lineage became at its absolute peak. Number 4. Seiko Prospex Marine Master Professional SLA 08160TH Anniversary Limited Edition. The Marine Master has always been the point in Seiko's dive catalog where the brand stops answering to the market and starts answering only to itself. The SLA 081 is that philosophy at its highest. Built to mark 60 years of Seiko dive watchmaking, this is a true professional saturation diver, rated to 600 meters. Built for the kind of underwater environments where most watches simply stop working. The titanium monoblock case construction eliminates the case back. The movement goes in from the dial side, maximizing water resistance at every possible failure point. Inside is the 8L45 caliber, running at 28,800 vibrations per hour with a 7.2-hour power reserve. $4,900 retail, and limited to 600 pieces worldwide, released in July 2025. It is sold out through authorized dealers, and the secondary market is already sitting well above retail, which says everything you need to know about how people responded to it. This one you hunt, not buy. Before watches 3, 2, and 1, there is something important you need to understand. A note on Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko is a separate brand operating under the same parent company as Seiko. If you walk into an authorized Seiko dealer and ask to see a Seiko, Grand Seiko is not what they will show you. The two brands are sold in separate boutiques, marketed separately, and priced in an entirely different universe. Grand Seiko is included in this guide because this is a map of everything the Seiko Holdings ecosystem can produce. And because Grand Seiko's origin is inseparable from the watchmaking culture that built everything above this point. The engineering philosophy, the finishing discipline, the pursuit of Japanese craft over Swiss convention, all of it runs from the SKX series at number 24 to what you are about to see at number 1. Think of the first 21 watches as a river. Grand Seiko is the sea it flows into. Number 3. Grand Seiko Evolution 9 Sport Collection. Grand Seiko makes sport watches. The Swiss watch industry has not fully processed this. The Evolution 9 Sport is the most modern, assertive expression of what Grand Seiko can produce in a tool watch format. titanium case at 44.8 millimeters, and a high-beat automatic running at 36,000 vibrations per hour. The finishing moves between matte and mirror-polished surfaces in a way that looks different under every light source and requires hand techniques that no production shortcut replaces. Between $5,000 and $10,000 or above, depending on dial and configuration. What you get for that range is one of the most technically finished watches in production from any brand at any price. The Zaratsu polishing techniques applied to this sports case are the same methods used on Grand Seiko's most formal dress pieces. There is no lower standard applied to the tool watch. That decision, that a sport watch deserves the same craft as a dress watch, is either an indulgence or a philosophy. And Grand Seiko clearly made its choice years ago. This is what it looks like when a brand decides it does not have to choose between built and beautiful. This next watch is what made people understand what Grand Seiko already was. Number 2. Grand Seiko White Birch Selg 005. The dial is meant to look like the bark of a birch tree in winter. It does, exactly. The texture was not achieved by printing or machining a pattern onto a flat surface. It was built through a process of layering and finishing that cannot be automated and cannot be fully replicated, producing a dial surface that is slightly different on every single watch that carries it. Under changing light, the white birch dial moves. The lines that suggest bark in direct sunlight shift into something more abstract in shadow and back again. You notice this the 10th time you look at it, not the first, which is the mark of something that rewards the kind of attention it gets from being worn daily. The high-beat 36000 movement underneath is one of Grand Seiko's most accomplished automatics. Precise, smooth, and built to tolerances that have more in common with scientific instruments than consumer products. The case finishing operates by the same principle. Transitions between polished and satin surfaces are cut so sharply that the line between them looks impossible. Prices are between $5,000 and $10,000, depending on configuration. The white birch is extraordinary. One watch sits above it. One watch started the entire conversation about what this brand actually was. Number 1. Grand Seiko Snowflake, SBGA 211. In 2005, Grand Seiko released a watch with a dial that looks like fresh snow caught in afternoon light. The watch community notices. Then they do not stop. The Snowflake's dial, created through a silver plating process that takes 12 to 15 hours per piece, producing a surface that is matte, textured, and completely different depending on where the light falls, is unlike any other dial in production. Not better in the sense of technically superior surfaces. Better in the sense of being completely and irreducibly itself, impossible to copy, without the hands and the time that produced it. But the dial is almost a distraction from what is happening underneath. The spring drive movement is one of the most genuinely original inventions in watchmaking history. A traditional mechanical watch uses a metal escapement to regulate how quickly the mainspring releases its energy, ticking in discrete steps, approximating time in small intervals. The spring drive uses a mainspring for energy, the way any mechanical watch does, but regulates the release of that energy using a magnetic braking system. The result is a second hand that glides continuously, without ticks, without steps. It moves the way time actually moves. Seiko spent over 20 years developing it. The accuracy sits at plus or minus 1 second per day, more precise than most Swiss mechanical movements at twice this price. The Swiss watch industry received the spring drive in 1999 and went quiet about it. That silence was its own kind of answer. The Snowflake retails at $6,900. The secondary market sits between $4,500 and $7,500. Not the most expensive watch on this list, the SLA 081 limited edition is selling above retail on the secondary market. The number 1 position has nothing to do with price. The Snowflake earns it because it represents what Seiko has been building toward for over a century, a watch that is better, not louder. A movement that solved a problem most watchmakers never admitted was a problem. A dial that made collectors reconsider what Japanese craftsmanship was even capable of. No other brand makes a movement like this at this price. No other brand makes a dial like this. And no other brand at this level has been this quiet, completely, and certain of what it is, without needing anyone else to confirm it. That confidence, accumulated over 130 years of making watches that were better than their reputation, is what the snowflake is. Everything on this list builds toward it. 24 watches, one brand. Entry points start around $300, finish near $7,000, and there is nothing on this list that doesn't belong there. What Seiko built across more than a century of watchmaking is something the industry has never fully credited. A ladder from accessible to extraordinary, where every rung is worth standing on. No filler. No brand premium is applied to ordinary mechanics. Just watches that do what they promise, at every price, for every kind of person who cares about what sits on their wrist. Your watch is somewhere on this list. Maybe it is the SKX series that starts everything. Maybe it is the Alpinist that goes on your wrist in the morning and does not come off for 10 years. Maybe it is the Snowflake that waits until the right moment arrives. All of them are worth knowing. That was the point. If this helped you find yours, or just gave you a better understanding of why this brand keeps showing up in every serious watch conversation, hit like and subscribe. See you in the next one.